Hey everyone, happy Friday. My name is Haley Hayhurst. I am a podcast producer and visibility coach. I help businesses and entrepreneurs grow their podcast and their visibility through podcast and marketing. So, I am so excited for this topic today because I get a lot of questions about how to get your first sponsor on your podcast. And this is really going to be a three-step process that I'm going to talk you through today, but you have to do it in order or it won't line up correctly. So, I know we always talk about how important timing is on these things, but honestly, there's so many sponsors out there that if you have a goal in mind, this is how you'll reach it. So, let's get right into it. Think about, as we talk about this, put in the comments who you want your sponsor to be, what niche you're in, what topics you cover, if you already have like your dream sponsor in mind. Let me know in the comments, or if you're watching the replay, still comment #replay, and I can talk you through a little bit more of how you can like niche down into getting that specific sponsor. But while we're talking about this, just keep one in mind. So, the first thing you're going to do is figure out which sponsor you actually want. And then from there, figure out how it aligns with your podcast. So, I see a lot of podcasters, they get a sponsor, but it doesn't align with them at all. I'm thinking of this podcast I used to be obsessed with. It was a true crime podcast, and they had a lot of it was like HelloFresh and just like different sponsors like that. And yeah, their audience may love that and there may be a place for that, but at one point it kind of just looks like you're just looking for money. It looks like you're just wanting to make money and it doesn't align. But you really want to, when you have a sponsor, align it with your goals, your podcast, your topics, so your audience is actually interested in it. So that's super important to keep in mind here because there are so many other sponsors that you could get that align with your podcast. The number one thing that I see a lot of people do when they start their podcast is want their sponsor immediately. They want to find a sponsor within the first couple weeks, days, months, whatever it may be. But you really have to grow your brand. So an example of this is I have a client, her name is Kelsey Foremost. She's the host of the Find Your Magic podcast, and it is a great podcast. And she had already had a following of about 14,000 people on Instagram. She is a previous actress, she is a copywriter, she has her brand built, and she hired me on to help her get her podcast up and going to help her expand her brand. So, someone like her, she can find a sponsor immediately. She got a sponsor even before she launched her podcast. We sponsored with Kajabi for her podcast because it aligned really, really well. But if you're just starting off and you have maybe 100 followers, 500 followers on Instagram, you're really going to want to build up to where you can be seen as a leader in your industry, and then you can bring on sponsors. So, the number one thing that I want you to spend your time with is figuring out how you will get more Instagram followers, Facebook followers, Twitter followers, whatever it may be. Micro influencers are huge right now. And so, if you're looking to have a brand sponsor your podcast, you're going to want to have a solid audience. These brands will give you money. They will give you money, but they want to make sure that they see the return. And so let's think of my very first podcast episode was with the podcast Save Her Seat. They are a duo. They have an amazing business, and their first sponsor was this candy brand. I think it's Smart Sweet, and it's because the lady who I interviewed, she has children and they love it, and so she could use that really well in her brand of showing off her kids eating their products, and it just aligned with her. And so figuring out what aligns with you is important. What I always recommend if you want to start monetizing or start getting in the routine of having commercials or the routine of having, yeah, just a commercial break, Put in your own commercials. So if you have a business, put in the comments what your business is, and you bring on clients or you sell a service or you sell a product, you can put that into your podcast. Create a commercial for yourself. This is what I have a lot of my clients do when they have a business. I'm thinking of my client Liz, who's the host of the Outdoor Entrepreneur podcast. We are currently looking for sponsors for her because we've done a lot of the groundwork of building up her brand, getting her visible, getting her in the sight of line of these big brands that would sponsor her. And so once we did all that, she has her own commercials in there right now. Yeah, so Erica, you're a business coach and performance coach. You could definitely record your own interviews and put them in there and talk about your services that you have or your coaching program, how people can get into your coaching program. Those sorts of things will really resonate well with your audience because it aligns so well and they can learn more about you. So, in this long story, the number one thing that you need to do is build up your brand. Now, once you have your brand built, let's say you have about 1,000 followers plus, it will not take you very long to get there. You definitely, if you put your mind to it and do the outreach that I talk about in almost every live video, maybe I'll talk about that next week. The outreach part of your ideal listeners, your ideal brands, all of this, you need to do the outreach and then they will follow you. So once you have the following, this is where it gets really fun. This is where you go to these brands and actually pitch yourself to them. You need to be really clear on what you want. Do you want to run a commercial in how many episodes? Do you want to cost how much? Do you want to join the affiliate program? You need to get really clear with what you want. And if you ever have questions about this, just send me a DM. I can help you walk through like some pricing things or what will make most sense. Sometimes it makes more sense to be an affiliate. Sometimes it makes more sense to be paid up front. And so really just thinking about what you want and then you pitch yourself to them. You present yourself as an expert in your industry, you show off, and you really show them why you are the podcast that they should sponsor. And I have a template that I'll put up on my website in the coming weeks of a script for this. It's similar to my podcast pitch script, but it's a lot more business focused. You need a media kit, you need different things, and then you can pitch yourself. But taking a step back, you definitely want to make sure it aligns and you want to make sure it's a brand that your audience follows and loves. And so one easy way to do this, like my client Liz, she wants to be sponsored by REI. REI is this amazing outdoor store that I'm sure most of us have heard of. And so with her, we will tag them in a bunch of posts that relate to REI. We will share some of their posts on her stories. We want to get her face in their DMs so when we do get to that pitch that we send to them, they will already be like, oh, I've seen her before. Where do I know her from? Instagram. Oh, she has a following. And it will be a no-brainer for them. So the 3 things I want you to really think about before you pitch yourself is, do you have the following? Does your audience love it? Will it resonate with them? Will they purchase it? Do you use it? Do you like it? And then go for it. So I'm really excited to hear which type of brands you are all interested in getting sponsored by and what your podcast and how it relates. You know, there's so many different ways that you can use a sponsorship. You can have it as a commercial in your podcast. You can have it as social media posts. You can have it in an email if you have an extensive email list. I have a client, her name is Ashley Chanel. She is thinking about coming out with a podcast, but she likes to be on other people's podcasts. And so one way that we really sell her to these different podcasts is say that she will not only send out an email about the podcast, and she has a huge email list. Her focus is Facebook ads, and so she will run a Facebook ad promoting that episode, which who doesn't want that as a podcast host? Who doesn't want that? And so she gets to show off her skills through Facebook ads and also gets to be a no-brainer on these podcasts. It's a win-win for both of them. And so there's so many different ways that you can promote sponsors. It doesn't have to just be in your podcast. Let's say your podcast gets 500 downloads every episode. but your social media reach is 1,300 people or 13,000 people or whatever it may be. Figure out what makes sense for you and this brand and then pitch them based off of what they would love. So if it's a product and you have a video podcast, that would make sense. You can show off the product on video. If it is a service or an app and it's tech related and your podcast is tech related, then you could talk about it in your podcast. You could talk about it on your blog. You could talk about it really anywhere that it makes sense. And so don't just limit yourself to your podcast. Even if you just have, you could get thousands of downloads per episode. You could get 500. Figure out a way that it makes sense for the brand and yourself. So this has been a lot of information, and it's definitely a lot of groundwork before you can get to the part where this money is flowing in. You can make an income from your podcast. You have to make sure that it aligns with you, and you have to make sure that you have the following to support it. Those are the two biggest things. I don't want to see any of you go off and find just a random, let's say you have a beauty podcast or a lifestyle and beauty podcast, and some brand you come across and it's something totally unrelated, like auto shop repairs or something like that, or like a moving company. I want you to find one that aligns with you, because if you're patient and you keep building your brand in a way that makes sense for yourself, your clients, your listeners, these people will come to you, and you will come to them as well. So yeah, Erica, definitely work on the following. If you want any tips on that, I can look over your social media again and give you some tips on what you could be doing to maybe promote it a little bit more and connect with more listeners. But it's a lot of outreach, everyone. So if you have any questions, I'm here to help you. I hope that this was super helpful. I love going live every Friday, and I will be back next week with another live video. But in the meantime, send me messages, connect with me on Instagram. I just hit 1,000 followers on there, so very excited to connect with more of you. So I will talk to you all soon. Have a great weekend.